I mean, hi Rebecca, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm great, Jonas. How are you?
Perfect. So one of the things that I always find is um, with live streaming, you go live, and I tell everybody this. You don't know if you're connected, you don't know if you're live yet, etc. So sometimes you're kind of in this limbo until you start getting the feedback.
Yes.
Until then, how about you start introducing yourself and telling the people who you
Yeah,
are?
definitely. I'm just curious, like where will we see comments come through and how
So
will
it would be so
live?
we're live. I can see
Yeah, I see.
we're currently live. So the comments will come in on at the bottom in the LinkedIn.
Okay. So if people
Yeah,
have questions, they'll pop them down there.
yeah. So
Okay,
I'll keep an eye out, and then we'll answer questions as we go along on a rolling basis. Yeah. So I'm joining it. I need to. Yeah, there we go. So we're live. We're good.
great. Yeah. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me on. So I am Rebecca. I am a career transition coach, former recruiter, former commercial banker turned recruiter. So essentially, what I do now is help people who are mid senior level professionals who are looking to kind of refine or pivot careers into something that, they're at a stage in their life where they really are looking at their values or their priorities. Maybe they've hit burnout and now they're like, you know what, I've got a family or I don't really want to be working 60 hours a week. So, really sort of refining what is important to them at this stage in their life with career, what lights them up, what are the skills they want to leverage, and helping them to sort of either pivot into a new role or maybe it's a similar role at a new company, but just really ultimately to dumb it down is helping people find jobs and careers that really bring them more fulfillment and purpose and joy and meaning.
Thank you so much. I was kind of like setting up everything, so I know what you're gonna say, so I didn't really get into it. But at the same time, one of the things that I want to do is I want to welcome everybody who's joining us today for this conversation. Thank you all so much for joining, and then, man, put where you are from, getting to us from in the chat. Say hi, and we can say hi back. We want this to be like really interactive. If you have any questions at any time, put them in the chat. I'm always kind of taking a look. I see Robert is here. Hi Robert, welcome. And then we have a business in here called About Me Templates. All right, there you go. Why not? Thank you for joining us today. And we'll let's I guess we can get into it, huh?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, like typically I was able to see how many people are live. Let me refresh and see if that's going to help. Nope, not today. Okay.
Really hard here. Okay. People, I'm
Uh,
seeing it's come through.
yeah, I'm seeing some reactions come through as well. Okay, so I think let's get into the first question. And one of the things that um, I get a lot of is people reach out to me. They're like, Jonas, I want to do remote work. I'm interested. And some of the stuff their background is they're medical doctors, they're civil engineers,
Mhm.
not really very conducive to remote work. And some of them are like, I'm interested into potentially getting into tech. How do I do it? So I've been getting so many of those questions. When I saw your profile a while back, I was like, ding, 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 ding. Okay, Rebecca is going to be a really good person to have join us for this. Right. So today I'm really excited to have you for that. So that is my question. Like, if somebody comes to you, asks you the same question, what would be your feedback?
Yeah, definitely. And I have worked with clients that have been in non-tech roles that want to move into tech. Not anyone like in maybe a medical profession. I can kind of riff on that or brainstorm a bit, but I can speak to, really feel like the principles are the same, like with transitioning careers. And so, like, I'm just thinking of an example where I had a client who was in nonprofit world and she really wanted to get into tech. And she was doing some product work with that. And I think it's really thinking about, again, it kind of comes back to what are the skills that you can do that could translate into tech. So, or like if I stick with this product example within nonprofit going into tech, sometimes we need to look at what is the language that they're using in these industries. So, for example, if you're a nonprofit, you might have worked with donors, but instead on your resume, your LinkedIn, you're going to maybe start calling them clients, or you're just going to thread in some of this SaaS language that translates over. So I think it's about picking that apart. I always say, like, starting with clarity, or like, what are the things that can translate? Another really good thing you can do, which I always advise my clients, is to get inspiration from other people. Like, who else has been on that path that's made that pivot? Look at what their profile looks like. What have they transitioned? How are they talking about themselves? You might even be able to reach out to that person who's been able to make that transition and ask for a short informational chat. And I think what I've learned is people love to talk about themselves, and they love to share their stories, and they like to help others. So if they are someone maybe that's transitioned from medical and got into more of a tech space, or was able to move that into a remote role through maybe an online platform, like, I think leverage your community, like speak to others that have done that and emulate it, get inspiration, see how they did it. I think that's one thing I've noticed we try to do too much, is try to figure it out all on our own, when we have a beautiful community, especially with LinkedIn, that we can sort of reference to. So those are just some tips off the top of my head, that how I would sort of navigate that kind of
That's
on paper and off paper.
that's really good. I really like that terminology. Sometimes, in different spaces, the same things, they're called different. Talking
Yeah,
about donors and clients, somebody in the nonprofit space, for example, knows how to raise money. No,
exactly.
they know how to fundraise. And if you go into SaaS, for example, how those are such transferable skills. Having the ability to go out and ask people for money is something that you learn how to do in the nonprofit, maybe sometimes even more than you'd learn in any other industry, right? So if you're trying to get into SaaS, leveraging that is going to be so good. And I think that's super, super good advice.
Yeah. And even if, like, you're in product, you're doing product management, let's say for nonprofit, like, still the terminology, like, it's still going to be a similar process for tech. You're just using like the ideation all the way through to, launch. And you're just kind of getting more into that MVP, like the language that they're using in tech, and just sort of thread that through. Like, they might not be referring it to an MVP in the nonprofit space, but this is how you start to talk, because the principles are really the same, right? But
They
exactly.
are. As you speak to that, one question that popped into my mind though, and this is something I ask some people as well. When you come from a background that, let's say, is not technical, you're not a software engineer, and you get into product, how do people navigate those? Like, because the question can arise where somebody says, you don't have a development background. I know you've got the project management skills because you've done something similar somewhere else. How are you going to fill that gap?
You mean like if someone is going from like a non-technical person that wants to be a product manager or a project
Mm,
manager?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of experience hiring product managers and working with them as clients over the years. So every company is different. Like, a lot of companies don't require a technical background to be a product manager, right? So
Mm,
it's even like, I think a project manager could be a good stepping stone too. I think product, it's really about, can you solve problems? Like, are you efficient? Are you thinking about like always how to make something better? Are you working well with people? Are you someone that's able to kind of cross functionally like get everyone on board and speak the language of the developers, but you don't need to actually be able to do the coding. So every company's different. So if that's something that people that are listening, like, I've always wanted to get into product, but I'm not a software engineer. A lot of companies are not, I mean, I can't really think of many that I've hired recently that are actually requiring that. I mean, so think about the other skills that are drawing you to that.
interesting. Okay. So I'm identifying a gap in my understanding because I thought a little bit of it was required. So, okay, maybe help me understand. So
Yeah,
there is
I love talking about product.
so there is the person who leads, let's say, software development project,
Mhm.
that, let's say, needs to be the architect for it, where they have to design what the structure of the code looks like, what needs to be done on a high level. What are those people called?
So here, I can really dumb it down. So the way that if we want to think about engineers and product managers, The product managers are the what and the why are we going to build it? Like, what are we building? Why are we building it? So it's more connecting the dots with the customers. The software developers are the how. So they're like, the how are we going to build that, right? So if I'm understanding your question, I think the product, they're definitely working, the product managers are working closely with the software developers. So they do need to understand, like, they do need to be technical in some sense of understanding, like, what are requirements? Is this making sense? And, to have that respect with the developers, but they don't need to necessarily be coding themselves, but they, so they're the ones that are working with the designers. They're the ones that are A/B testing with the client. Like, yeah, like, who is it going to be our users? And then they're kind of relaying this back and like working with the developers to build that.
Amazing. Yeah, it does. This makes a lot. I think I had the technical project managers mixed up with those who are not technical,
Oh, yeah.
right? So this is actually really good because I know there are a lot of people who have extensive project management experience, who've managed teams, etc. And then because of the technical side, I've had this understanding where, well, you need to have some background in that. And the fact that you're telling me otherwise is perfect is amazing. I love that.
Yeah, well, there's product managers and then there's technical project managers. So maybe that could be different. Like if they are more managing the scope of like who's doing what and overseeing the like prioritizing of that. But as far as like a product manager goes, they're kind of that liaise between the tech and
Yeah.
the other teams.
Basically, they're the translators in between,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like a good
Okay.
product manager, I always said, is someone that can like explain technical things to non-technical people,
Perfect. So let me say hi to all the people that are saying hi to us. So let me see. I got Yared from Ethiopia. Hello, Samuel. Same. Belai, Riyad, Lul, Osman, Hanna, Robera, uh,
Oh, wow.
Wuhib Selassie, and Robera. Oh, thank you all so much for joining us today and saying hi as well. Welcome. Welcome to this session today. I hope you're already getting some really good value. I certainly am learning already, so I'm super excited about that. And okay, so you you know now you kind of are working on your resume or LinkedIn. You're kind of starting to use the language. You're kind of positioning yourself to kind of step into your next, let's say, a product role. I think that's a good example to have. So what other things would you need to do as you're, let's say, searching for your next role?
Yeah. So I just want to make sure so if you're switching careers or if you're looking to get into tech or just like where do you go if you're kind of wanting to pivot and don't know where to start? Is that the question? Or
Okay, let me try and clarify. So let's say you are a project management manager in engineering, like civil engineering, let's say,
okay,
and then you want to get into product in tech. That
okay,
is where the path that you want to go on. Um, First is, of course, the language that we talked about, right? Going through your LinkedIn, trying to make sure that it's aligns to tech. What other things can you do to kind of make you an interesting prospect to those companies looking to
yeah. I
hire?
mean, I think again, this is a lot about like how are you branding yourself both on paper and off paper, right? So if you are more like project manager focused, like what have you done? I mean, this is another thing as I'm thinking, I see this happen a lot. Like a lot of times you could be called a project manager, but a lot of what you're actually doing in the day to day is very like product management related. And it kind of gets fuzzy. And I get this a lot with clients. They're like, no, but that's not my title. And I'm like, well, were you doing product manager roles? Were you doing this? Were you building a roadmap? They're like, well, yeah, I do all that. I'm like, you're a product manager too. So I invite people, it's your resume, it's your LinkedIn, it's your life, do what you will, but I never lie, never would say put anything on your resume that you don't have experience doing. But if you do have the experience and it's just not your title, I like to get creative. Like you might want to say project manager slash product, it's just something where it's like whoever's looking at the resume, something where they're going to know that you're relevant. So like you've got that beautiful headline place in your LinkedIn, right? Here's where you can put, you know, X amount of years experience in project management and product management. Talk to that, speak to that, because the reality is like you just need enough for you to be relevant for a recruiter or a hiring manager that's scanning your profile when you've applied to say, okay, yeah, actually like want to read on. And then once you get to have the conversation, then you can definitely explain like what you have done, like related to the project and product management sense and how you see those skills cross over. And then you can explain your stories. But if you're just kind of putting project, and there's no kind of words in there, I mean, it sounds very simple, but this is the stuff that actually works to get you noticed. So you're like, oh, I'm relevant. So that would be
Yeah.
like a big pointer I would have if you are want.
That's such a good point. And I've had, um, I've been on people's LinkedIn's and it's so chaotic. Like there's everything, right? They're a digital, they're a software developer, they're a digital marketer, they're, and sometimes I'm like, you can't be, well, you can potentially have the skill sets in all these different areas. But I'm like, you're trying to tell a story. What is the
Exactly.
story? What is the story? Is the story like I try and do different things, or is.
Well, I speak to this a lot, right? It's that cohesiveness. And this is why I always advise take a step back further before you go into updating your resume and your LinkedIn. Like, really get clear whether you're working with a coach or doing your own work. Like, where do I want to focus and why? So that you actually have a cohesive brand that you're building. And so it will tell that story, as you're saying. But if you don't have that clarity, and if you're trying to be a jack of all trades, as we call it, people think like, oh, I can do everything. Look at me. And it's actually, I talk about this a lot. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're job searching, because people actually want to show some focus and some story. So pick those two. You might be able to do a ton of things, and a lot of people can. And a lot of my clients are amazing at a lot of things, but pick those two or three and focus and kind of tell that story there. And look, you can always change things like your
Yes.
LinkedIn, you can try it out, like test it out, see what works. Like say like you're going for product, make it tell that story. If you're not getting any hits or it's still not working, what do you need to tweak? So again, if you're a product manager, you're going to A/B test this a bit and like see like how is this working. But I
Exactly.
think, like you said, have it feel cohesive, tell that story a bit. And again, for anyone watching, that headline, you get about 200 characters to really tell your story. I think one of the other mistakes I see people make is just putting their job title and the company they're at. And I'm like, no, like you don't need to tell your story there. Like, this is where you get to really kind of highlight yourself.
Yeah, that's such good tips. Uh and this is something that I've noticed. I have noticed some profiles, no picture, no background,
Yeah.
no tagline. And I'm like, if you're actively trying to make sure you don't find work, perfect, amazing.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's basically like, you have a shop and there's nothing in the window.
Yeah, it's prime
You
real
know,
estate, that
it's prime
background.
real estate. Like you're people passing by, you want them to take a look and be curious and walk in. Like when you don't have any of those things, then people are like, okay, this store is empty. They just pass by.
Totally.
They're like,
Totally.
oh, this store empty, nothing. And then the other aspect to your point is, if in the display you have clothing on one side, you have fruit, you have like a bunch of people are like, I don't know what is inside here. I don't want to go in. But if
Yeah.
let's
I'm
say
not
it's all
sure what you're
clothing and they
selling.
want to buy clothes, they're gonna go in. So sometimes like you have to look at your LinkedIn. And it's like, what is the messaging? What is my
Yeah.
LinkedIn saying? Is this
No, it's
saying
a good analogy. I love this because if you're like, you got the cake and you've got the coffee and you got everything you're selling, but I'm like, I actually really want cake and I really want good chocolate cake. And I don't really trust that you have good chocolate cake because you're
mm,
selling like 20 other things here. So I
exactly?
don't know. I just thought that. But
Uh,
it's
it's so true. You feel like it's average, right? You're like,
yeah.
I want, like, if you want cake, you want to go to the place where it's like all these different kinds of cake. They all
Yeah.
look good. You're like, okay, this is where I want to go, or at least something similar. You want like donuts and stuff. Like you don't want to see, plants being
You're
sold
making
next to
me
the.
hungry on
Yeah.
it.
So sometimes some things are like next to each other, so you can kind of present them together. But then every time I see, let's say, um engineer, civil engineer, and then digital marketer, I'm kind of like, okay, these are like apples and oranges. Like you should not, I
Yes.
don't know if you, and to your point, it's not a life sentence. I literally change my stuff regularly.
Yeah,
regularly.
play around with it, see what
Yeah.
works, and I think we feel like, and also like this is where the about section in LinkedIn too, if people that are listening are, I would love to know too, like pop in the chat if you're someone that's navigating a career shift now, or if you're kind of figuring out how to brand yourself. I mean, in the about section, what I like on LinkedIn is I feel like it's a place where you get to show your personality a little bit more. It gets to be a little bit less formal. Like our resume is a little bit more formal, but LinkedIn, it's like, think about what you would want to read. Like, so like, I personally don't advise speaking in the third person here. I think it's nice to say, like, hey, I'm Rebecca. Here's what I do. And, definitely highlight your story a bit. You can share a little bit more. And then if you have other hobbies or things you want to share about below, I think this is your opportunity to do that. But I think sometimes we miss that too, especially if you're transitioning careers. Tell them why. Tell them like how your experience at this company really makes sense for this new role, or these jobs correlate together, whatever that is. You can share a bit more.
Yeah, it's a lot of good storytelling, and
Thanks.
earlier what you said, like even in all the roles that you did before, they might not have been directly related to where you're going next, but then the descriptions you could start changing, right? And starting to speak to, there's a
Yeah,
thousand things that you're doing, maybe like 15-20% of them reflect on where you want to go. Put those 15% down there so
exactly.
that people scanning your LinkedIn are like, okay, I'm looking for somebody in X. This person is showing me that. They're showing me their potential and capacity.
And I want to piggyback on that too, because this is for those that don't know my background too. I made a total career pivot. Like I started my career in commercial banking out of college for 10 years. And then I switched into tech recruiting without ever having worked in tech or having been a recruiter. So I really latched on to the things in my banking career that I felt like I wanted to run with. So for me, for example, that was when I got to go out and meet my clients, which was few and far between because I was more in an analyst role. But there were times when I got to go out, understand, meet my clients, and I loved that. So I was like, okay, there is something about this job that I like. And I kind of called it client relationship management. So on my resume, instead of saying credit analyst two or whatever I was like client relationship manager. And so this was on my resume. So it made it a little bit more of a bridge to other roles. And even when I was speaking to people, so don't forget, like when you're actually, if you are in a transition, it's really important how you're speaking about where you're going, even if you don't know exactly what it is. So for me, I would say, yeah, I'm really excited. I'm in a career transition and I'm getting into client relationship management. And I was so excited, even though I didn't really at the time know that was going to mean recruiting. And people were like, people respond to you and your energy. So they're like, oh my God, this is so inspiring. It's amazing. Oh, you got to meet Joey and this person. And, so this is how it happens. So don't underestimate, like, how are you talking about where you're going? So think forward thinking, not so much like, here's all I did in the past and I'm only limited to that. Think about your direction and how are you talking about it in the future sense.
I love that so much. So I want to check our and say hi to some more people. I see. Uh, so Nathaniel again, another Robera. Yirne is back to gay. Hello, hello. Somebody actually, I saw somebody mention. Maybe I'll check on this side. LinkedIn, the thing that I hate about LinkedIn Lives, their comments and their whole feature needs a lot of work. It's not their main focus compared to like all the other stream platforms. So I have somebody who's just said medicine student turned technical person bucket. So somebody's, um, and this might be a little bit um, surprising to you, but a lot of medical doctors in Ethiopia are looking to change directions. There isn't a lot of work for them in
Okay.
country. Yeah, a lot of graduates in medical, not it's not what it used to be back in the day. So I think there's too many graduates, not enough work kind of
Yeah.
situation happening. So I get a lot of those coming in into my DMs talking about that. I kind of want to backtrack, and I think this might be even more important than some of the stuff that we talked about, and that is I'm sure you have a lot of clients coming to you and they're like, I know I need to make a change, but I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what to do with my career. like they're just kind of lost and confused. The area is not very clear. How do you help them navigate and get a clarity around, okay, this is what you need to think about, this is what direction, so just help them kind of untangle the chaos.
Yeah, yeah, I get that a lot. So you're not alone if you're out there and you're kind of, even if you're in mid-career and you're shifting, like we've all been there. And I have a lot of clients, most of my clients are mid-senior level that are looking to really refine things, or they're good at a lot of different things, but they don't know where to focus. We like, I always start with like a real deep dive, like getting clear. Like, so that can be, there's a lot of like, I don't know if there would be like through a career fitter or something like this, where you can just sort of start to flesh out some questions, like what, like just reflect. I think start with the internal, start with your own self-reflection of like, think about your last roles. Like, what were the areas that you enjoyed? What were those moments of the day where you were energized, where you were like in your flow, in your zone? Like, you know, these are kind of going to start to give you some insights to like when I talked about myself, I hated building spreadsheets, which is mostly what I did, but oh, I liked when I got to go speak with my clients. So I guarantee there's some things that you can kind of look back and say, okay, and then also know your no's. Like, I think it's equally as important to know. So as you're reflecting on, I really liked this. Oh God, every time I had to do this activity, I just feel like I want to just, you know, go to sleep, or I'm just so bored, whatever that is. Like, that's a no. That's in your kind of non-negotiables. And this will help you to sort of paint a little bit more of a picture around the directions you want to go. And you don't have to know perfectly. Like, you can just start to initially thread on and build on, these are the things I know I like to do. Of course, it does help to like reflect with someone. Like, if you're not working with a coach, like that's a great way to do it. But like, go to your friends, go to your prior colleagues or your current colleagues, and you don't need to tell them, hey, I'm jumping ship. You can just say, hey, I'm doing some self-exploration. Like, what do you see my greatest strengths as? Like, what do you come to me for advice for? I think getting feedback from other people, we only know what we know. Oftentimes we have blind spots too. And these are what I call like our secret sauce. So it's things that are so effortless to you that you just take for granted. You're like, well, doesn't everyone know how to do this? But no,
Mm,
not everyone does. So these are really important things. So I would say do the self-reflection, start to get clear on what lights you up, what drains you, go to your friends, go to some of your colleagues, get their feedback. And this will start to help to paint a bit of a picture for you around, okay. And then there's lots of tools out there too. Like, if you aren't working with a coach, like there's tools around like, here's some of my skills, like what careers are there? You know, so leverage some of these tools online and things like that to just help you get started.
yes. And
Um,
yeah, that's really good. And actually, I want to say, um, I was working corporate before I transitioned into what I'm doing now, and civil engineer, uh, masters in construction project management, worked oil and gas. And when I left that job, I knew I wasn't meant to be there, but it
yeah,
was the best thing I had at the time, and I didn't know how it transitioned into anything. And I remember, so I did get laid off, which was unfortunate, but they set me up with a career coaching program which they paid for. And
yeah,
one of the things that I really, her name is Jen. So uh, Jen or Genevieve, amazing lady. So
yeah,
she would meet, would talk, and one of the things she did is she got me to fill out this form, which listed all the companies that I worked at, what I liked about,
mhm,
about them, like just a form. And by the end of it, the one thing I knew was every role I really, really enjoyed is where I had impact and influence and I could make decisions
yeah,
immediately. I knew that immediately. Like every role, I felt like I had no impact. I felt like I was just a small piece of a much bigger machine.
yeah,
I was not happy.
yeah,
And when I saw that, I was like, oh wow, okay. So now and I wasn't thinking of starting a company then.
yeah,
So in my mind, I was like, okay, even if I go into project management next, maybe it's best for me to not go corporate or work for a smaller company, maybe with the idea of starting my own business down the line, because corporate is sometimes like the higher up you go, you think you're gonna have more impact, but in a lot of times
Always, yeah.
it's not really the case. So I just knew in that moment, I'm like, okay, I just need to go work for a small company where my decisions can matter. Like I could have, and maybe it's a control thing. And now I'm like, it makes
Yeah.
it, yeah,
I think for you it was values, and this is a great point because oftentimes I mean I have clients that think, oh, I hate everything, or I don't want to go back into sales because, but what really it is, they just had some really bad experiences at these companies, and so like you were saying, you really got clear on impact was important, and you realize you made the connection. Oh, I can do that more at a smaller company. So it's sort of bridging that before starting your own. And so I think for those of you listening that are trying to navigate or thinking, gosh, there's so many things to the picture. Like you might not need to totally scrap everything you do and start over. You just might need to look at your values. Like, what is the culture like in the company? What is the product? What is the mission of the company? Maybe those things are off. And if you were doing the same thing in a different kind of environment or for a different company, that could be enough to be like, wow, like this is amazing, So it's like, I invite you to think, like Jonas was saying, think about all the things around. We don't have to just start from ground zero all the time. Like there
yeah,
just can be some refinement going on there. And really, like, I love what you said that, because it's like really also looking at what are your values? Like what's important to you, like in a company culture, in a mission, or go through that
yeah.
too.
And as you say that, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is sometimes with job searching, the way I've approached it in the past, and I see some people approaching it is like anybody, anybody who's willing to give me a job. And
Yeah.
I've actually gotten to a point where I think sometimes it makes sense to decide where you want to work if you know the companies that are really attractive to you, and have a list of them. Start circling them like a hawk. Like, you can actually have amazing strategy where you could start connecting with people in that org, having
I'm,
coffees with people in that org. If you can start really building a presence and connection, a relationship. After a while, you could have the CEO going like, this person doesn't work out at my company, why is he connected to everybody? Like, so you could actually,
yeah, or they're going to think of you like, these are these longer term networking strategies. I love that you said this. So it's like, yes, if there are those companies, like build those connections, check in with them, follow up.
yes, comment on if they post something, you
Yeah.
know if they post something on their company profile, get in there, say, hey, love this, amazing, you're a great company, wink wink, so people notice, people see, it's like, who's this person, like, why is he always here? Click, and then if something comes up, you definitely put yourself at the front of the line. And that's one of the things. It's like, you try once, no, you gotta be that person who's around, you
Yeah.
know
Like resilience too. I mean, there's a lot with my clients. If you are transitioning, the best thing you can do is to keep networking and to keep building these longer term relationships. And you aren't going to hear back from everyone. And that's okay. And we have to have thicker skin when we do this, or you need to follow up with people if you're trying to have informational conversations. Like send them a message, send them a follow up. By the third, if you still don't hear back, okay, move on, but like don't make it mean anything about you or that it's personal. Just keep going. Like I think I've heard stats before where people have transitioned careers, they've maybe contacted 70 people and they maybe got 20 conversations out of those and one led to a new role. So you only need those 1 to 5 people that do say yes. So focus on those little wins instead of, God, I contacted all these people. Like it's just a practice, everyone's gone and been through it at some point.
Yeah. The other question, like, I want to explore right
Yeah.
now is, um, maybe sometimes we don't feel like we deserve a really amazing job or what, all these different things. So I know you work with a lot of people. So what do you find to be very common limiting beliefs, and how do people go about resolving those?
A lot of them. And just so people know, like everyone, we all have moments of self-doubt. I've worked with clients that are VPs at very large tech companies that are still like, I don't think I'm good at my job. Right. So it's like the limiting beliefs. I think it's so some of the common ones, like I actually was just on with a client yesterday and she said, I feel like, she's experiencing burnout, working a ton in her job, but she's making good money. And she's like, gosh, part of me thinks maybe I should just settle for less money and just have a more relaxed job. And I was like, is that the only option? Like, is it possible? Do you believe it's possible to have a job that pays you what you want to be paid and that you get to show up and not feel like you're in burnout? So I think it's just deciding, creating these new pathways of like, actually, yeah, I can have both. It doesn't have to be an either or. Like that's a common one I see. Just a lot of people that haven't been interviewing in a while. They've been at their jobs for 8-9 years. Now they're in a position where they've got to get back in the game, and they're like, don't have a lot of confidence around that. So that's like a common belief of, another one is, I get this a lot because I'd say about 50% of my clients have been let go or are now interviewing again, and coming down to the salary conversations. They're like, well, I don't really feel like I have any clout to negotiate because beggars can't be choosers. And I was like, no. Like, if that's the energy you want to put out there, you can get that response, but you get to decide. Like, don't diminish your value and your skills just because you don't have a job right now. I mean, now only you can know your financial requirements, and maybe it makes sense to go in at this, and you get to decide that, though. You're not a victim to it. So I just want to encourage everyone to, even if you have been let go, like, you're still valuable. There's plenty of other companies that are going to want to hire you. So just notice that if you're going with that mindset of like, oh, I don't have a leg to stand on because I don't have a job right now. Like, that's just not true. You do. You've got this offer. If this one you don't want, there's going to be others, and this is the mindset. I always say, like, what we believe is possible for us and our mindset is equally, I'm going to say, probably more important than all the tactical things that you're doing, because you can do all the tactical things, but if you don't believe that you're going to show up well in that interview or that you're worthy of this job, like, guess what? Like, that's the vibe that you're going to be attracting.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, I this past week I was having a conversation with somebody who was gonna start a project or start the process to get placed with the company, and um, I was telling him, hey, I think for your skill set, 25 $30 an hour is fair. And he goes, oh, I think that's a lot. I'm in Ethiopia, I'm in Africa. These people I've hired from Africa before. And I was like, hold up. First of all, irrelevant.
Yeah.
Irrelevant. Like where they hired before, none of that matters. Doesn't mean anything. What matters is, who are you? What do you bring to the table? What is
Mhm.
the value that you're adding? Is
Yeah.
that fair value? That's it. Like, so to I was telling him, one, software developers local here, they charge an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
25 to 30 is still a big discount. And for him, he felt like it was a lot of money. I'm like, no, 25 $30 an hour is a massive discount still. They're
Yeah.
getting a really good deal. And going below that doesn't make any sense. Actually, you should be aiming to go higher. Once you prove yourself,
Yeah.
you should be looking to make more and more and more, because that's the value that you bring to the table. That's the perspective you need to have. And sometimes I definitely have noticed director level people who are like marketing, started out in copywriting, and I'm talking to them, okay, what kind of roles are you looking for? Like, if I could find some content writing jobs, anything really. And sometimes the lack, especially if you've been on the market for a while, you haven't
Yeah.
had any, so you start to get into desperation mode where you're like, I'll do whatever it takes. And I do feel like you have to sometimes just believe in something, whether it's in yourself or a higher power. Sometimes you just kind of course, always do your research, know what's out there, what the market is like. But at the same time, especially in North America, people value you to the level you value yourself.
100%. Like, I always say, like, you go first. Like, you set the tone. Like, you believe it, others believe it. Like, I always kind of joke, like, you could be like, it's kind of silly, but like, oh, I'm so excited, I sell the best cookies in the world. Like, people are going to be like, oh my God, where can I get your cookies? Like, they kind of go off of your energy. So it's like, go in that with knowing your worth, knowing your value. And then, like, you get to make the decision. If they counter you or come back, you get to say, actually, I am okay with that because I have these financial obligations and this makes sense for me. So that's going to be a yes for this long, or nope, so then you get to decide. And again, there's no shame in having we all have got bills to pay and whatnot. So, but just know that you're still making that decision. If they counter, we can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. So then you can say, great, that works for me. I'll do it for this much, for this long. And then I would like to look at an increase to this. Can we agree on that? Or however that navigates for you, or you say thanks, but no thanks, on to the next. So I think this is a really important shift. So we're not like, oh, they're offering me the job, I better just take it and do what they say,
Yeah. Uh, to your point earlier, what you talked about, people who haven't been in the job market for a very long time and they're coming back in, and it's almost like, you just got divorced. You
Yes,
haven't been dating him
back in
forever.
the dating game.
Back in the dating pool, and it's with careers. And this is something I've realized is you should never ever stop dating. That's just how it goes. And you always build your network, always meet new people, always explore. It's part of your job. Like, don't think, okay, I'm X at this company, this is what I do. It's like, yes, I'm X at this company, but at the same time, I'm also my own company. I have to make sure that I'm connecting with people. People know my name, people know who I am, so that more opportunities are continuing to flow
Yeah.
in my direction. I'm a huge advocate for content creation. I see, Rebecca, I know how active you are on LinkedIn, which I love.
It's like definitely part of my full-time job is the
And
content creation.
and even if you don't do it like to a crazy amount, um, just like, going on those quote unquote dates a couple of times in a year will keep you sharp. Will
Yeah.
make sure that other people are also aware that you're still, active, that you're still out there. So very important to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, it's a great way to kind of start to build your personal brand too, demonstrate some of your expertise. And I think it's best to do it when it feels organic. And we do it for reasons of like connecting with people, letting people know what we do, showing our expertise. And, and I think even if you are working in a full-time job too, and you're like, well, I don't really need to write, like it's an opportunity to just share your voice, like just a platform to be authentic and share, here's what's exciting for me, or here's, if you are someone that wants to build up your personal brand in this area, like, or you have certain topics that are really you're passionate about, start speaking about those. Because guess what? Someone might find you on LinkedIn that's looking for a podcast, and you're going to connect on that. And, so there's so much
Exactly.
going on there, and it's a lot of fun.
Exactly, right? Like, I remember when I discovered you, I think you commented on
Yeah.
something with Julia. I
Yeah.
saw your profile. I was like, I clicked in it. I looked through. You have good content in there. I'm like, okay, I see what she's speaking about. She would be an amazing guest for what I'm doing. So I reach out. Now
Yeah,
you're here
here we
today.
are. And that was
So
like less than 2 weeks ago. And I just randomly happened to jump on the live because I was like, oh, because I didn't know you, but I follow Julia because we're, she's in hiring and recruiting. And so I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And I just
exactly.
joined on, and then here we are. So yes, this is the
Yeah.
stuff that happened. And I'm going to say to those listening, interesting enough, I had set the intention for myself, I think for April, to just have more collabs and do more of these. And so this is where your intention setting comes into play. Like, what are your goals for the next month? Like, what do you want to kind of call in? I think having some awareness around that, even if it's just a thought or writing it down, like intentions can be very impactful. So
Yep. So I'm kind of wondering how I would like to go next. So I think we can start opening up for Q&A. If
yes.
anybody has a question, start to put it in the chat as we're kind of nearing the end. Before, like while we're doing that, one thing I want to ask Rebecca to do is I want her to talk a little bit about her services, what she does with her clients, how she works with them, just so that if anybody's interested, they can be aware.
Yeah. So I work with people in a 90-day, what I call my 90-day career transition program. So it's really where I partner with you if you are navigating a career shift or just kind of refining things and you're like, God, I feel really stuck and I want to focus my search and I don't really know what that looks like, but I know that I want to be somewhere where I'm going to be happy, for like looking into the more longer term trajectory of happiness and fulfillment in your career. That's my sweet spot. So we really start in with a real like deep dive clarity. So setting that foundation of kind of what I shared earlier about really kind of unpacking what is important to you, like what are the 1 to 3 career paths that we're actually going to pursue, so that you're not spinning your wheels and you're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall, like you're really focused. I do a lot with networking, so all the tactical things. If you missed it, I have over 10 years of recruiting experience, so you get my expert eye across like how are you branding yourself, your LinkedIn, your resume, interviewing strategies, everything all the way through closing that deal. So it's very full circle. There is a link in my LinkedIn bio. If you're someone where this sounds like a good fit, the next step is I would invite you in to book a free, like what I call career breakthrough call, where we just have a conversation. So I learn a little bit more about you, where you're at, where you're looking to get to, and we can see if there is a good fit for that.
Perfect. I wanted to make sure we get that in so that anybody who's interested doesn't miss out. Um, and I'm checking questions. So
I
if
can't see
anybody,
questions, so I'm gonna have to rely on you for that. I don't know if they're
uh,
coming through.
I know, as I said, LinkedIn, please, if you I know, like I'm speaking to the LinkedIn AIs, please fix this. You know,
I'm just curious, are you looking at comments on Restream or on LinkedIn?
on LinkedIn. Oh, you can't see anything on. Oh, my bad. Maybe I should have made that clear. Nothing is coming through on Restream. It's on LinkedIn on our page where it's going. So that is where I am right now. In the meantime, while we're waiting for questions, I have one thing I wanted to ask is job searching, applying. What would be your guidance for people? Like, where do you go to apply? How do you find those companies? How do you find the roles to apply to? That I know it's very basic things, but would be still nice to
Well,
hear.
yeah, what I mean, there's the obvious things of like setting up your search parameters on LinkedIn, but I'm finding a lot that there's inconsistencies. So check all of the sources. Just because a job is like not listed on a company website, you might find it on Google or Indeed or LinkedIn or vice versa. So I think check all the sources. I think that would be the main thing. And I think just setting up those searches, like this is where too networking is really helpful, because sometimes companies are, there's like that insider information where they actually aren't going to post it. They might just go through referrals first. So this is where building those connections of letting people know. The other tip I have, if you are looking for a job and you're sharing it on LinkedIn about, hey, I'm open for work, be really specific about what you're looking for. So I think one of the ways people shoot themselves in the foot is like, hey, I'm open for work, everyone, if you hear of anything. And they're like, well, I don't know what you do. So help people help you. Make it really obvious, like what you're looking for. Here's my skills. I'm looking for a project management role, a software developer. And this. So yeah, I think just kind of refreshing and checking. Those would be my biggest tips.
Those are good tips. I would encourage people, like if you're in transitions, to take time to kind of know where you're going first. I think that
Yeah.
was what was really helpful for me.
Yeah.
When I was going through my transition and I ended up here, I love what I do now. But when I was back then, I couldn't see this, right? All I knew was, okay, I want to do something where I want some level of impact, influence, control. That's what I knew. And
Yeah.
then now that I'm doing this, I'm like, this is such a good fit for me. Like I guess this is where I needed to be. But then at that point, I felt like I couldn't start my own thing because in construction, there's so many barriers that have to overcome, whether it's cost, whether it's experience, etc., etc. But then now, and what I'm doing now is very different. Like I am essentially in like recruiting slash talent platform slash some level of tech. Um, and sometimes you don't know what the future holds. You don't know what's gonna come up. So get on the journey, kind of start thinking about, okay, what do I love to do, what do I enjoy, and then once you kind of narrow it down to your point, when you ask people, don't just be like, I'm looking for work, anybody help please. Just
Yeah.
go out and say, I am looking for X and YZ in these industries, this is what I'm looking for, these kind of they just go straight
Yeah.
for what you want, and then people are like, oh, I know of somebody at this company
Totally.
that's a good fit, etc. So you uh, to Rebecca's
Making
point,
it
you
easy.
help people help you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just make it easy. I have a question, which is exciting. What is your take on educational background? This is from Wib Selassie. Okay. Tough to say. I won't expect you to say it, Rebecca. Okay. What's your take on educational background being a limiting factor to starting a new career in a different sector?
Yeah, this is an is interesting one, right? Because and funny, I actually do have a couple clients that have come from the education space and have made that move into corporate world or into, I think an obvious thing could be to look at ed tech companies. So as also as someone who's hired for ed tech, I know that there are certain roles that we've had that they actually we really wanted people that came from an education background. Again, it comes to what do you believe is possible? What would you like to thread through that? And then kind of making those skills, kind of drawing those lines there. There's so much that I'm seeing with like ed tech platforms and learning platforms or instructional design. Like there might be some threads there. Like if you were in education and you were using some of these, um, think about those threads. I mean, ed tech's obviously like an obvious place to kind of make that jump, but it's not the only place. So I think, yeah, Jonas, what are your thoughts? That's just kind of some of my initial
Yeah, the way I kind of thought of it is on a kind of a larger scale, where your educational background or where you want to go, you don't have like the education necessarily. Like let's say you want to become a programmer or software engineer, and you don't know how to code. For like if you're coming from that perspective, I would say um, some things you can't really escape, right? You're gonna have to learn to code. There's no ways around it. The other thing though, to what we talked about a lot about earlier, if you wanted to get into product though, very different, right? So you kind of have to have an understanding of, okay, this is my, what does the work require,
Mhm.
right? And then how can I fill that gap? And one thing I would say is, especially in tech, as long as you can do the work, um, credentials are not as important.
And
Oh,
yeah, I'm actually thinking of an example of literally someone that came from education and emailed me as the recruiter for a role literally 3 or 4 times before I actually had a conversation because they made such a strong argument of why they were going to be a good fit for the role. I like had no choice but to talk to this person. We actually ended up hiring him. So this is the other thing I think if you've been in education, there's definitely a lot of skills that you've learned from doing that and building curriculum and all these things. Like create a story out of that. Explain to people why. Here's where you're going to rely, like if you are making a jump like that, you're going to have to rely a lot on your networking. You're going to have to get in front of people. They're going to have to meet. You're going to have to email them. You're going to have to explain. Like you're going to have to get really thirsty and kind of, hey, because the blind applying is less. I don't really ever advise just relying on that, but here's where you're really going to have to advocate for yourself. And that's really important. And I think to your point, Jonas, of course, depending on where you're going, if you want to be a software developer, yes, of course, you will need to go to a boot camp. You know, you don't need to necessarily go for a 4-year degree, but you will have to do something that aligns. And then here you go. Now you've got more of a story to tell. Like, here's what I did in education. Here's all the problems that I had to solve. And now here with this degree, here's why I want to do this. People
yeah.
love the story. If you can get that and like keep believing in yourself, like this is how things will start to align and support you.
I agree, and people, I think they can relate, right? They can relate to job searching. They can relate to wanting to make a transition, and I feel like their inner person goes, go go go, and they want to support you because they can definitely see themselves being in your position. So I have a very specific question coming in from Robera. He says, "Hello, Rebecca. Great session. Thank you. It's so insightful. My first question is that you mentioned CRM earlier. I'm personally shifting my career from engineering to Salesforce ecosystem. What do you think I should do to get that trust, as the role will be with the data that's company's data? And the other question is that after we did all the recommendations you gave us, how to ask for referrals.
Okay, can I hear the first part of the question again?
The
Something
first,
about CRM, like
yes.
moving from
So I think if I kind of synthesize it, he's looking to transition from engineering to the Salesforce ecosystem, but that has to do with dealing with sensitive company data. How can he build trust? with potential hiring companies, is what he's asking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I don't really see an issue.
Maybe because it's global, right? So I think if you're local, let's say in the US, working with a US company, the trust is like, but if you're a global talent, right? If you're globally global professional, they're like, they might not know you, you're somewhere far away, so they might feel a lot more sensitive about their data.
Yeah, I mean, that would go back to the company. I mean, if the company's going to consider hiring you for the role, I would think that they would be okay with hiring, these are our parameters and this, and this. And I think, again, if there's specific skills, I mean, I feel like that's a kind of a bridge that would make sense, maybe going from software engineering more into the CRM Salesforce side of it. I would ask, do you have those certifications that they're looking? This is the kind of thing where those potentially certifications might be relevant if you're like working in the cloud or working with Salesforce. Like they might be sometimes just looking for those very specific things. But I think as far as like, what if I'm global and they're not going to trust me? Like I would sort of invite you again to say like, well, where is that coming from? Is that coming from them, or is that coming from a perception that you're having that may or may not be true? Because I would always say, like, I would invite you to say, is that the ultimate truth, or is every company going to think? And so I
I
kind of,
agree.
where
I
is
think
that?
that's a good point because some companies they don't have a global strategy. They're not going to hire you. I think that's the bottom line. Like
Exactly.
some companies, if they're open to hiring global, then that's just part
Yeah.
of, so
And it
it's
comes
not
down
going to,
to you, the individual, and they're going to interview you. And are they someone that has integrity? And that's going to come down to like that process. And then you're going to get to speak with them. And, so that's, yeah,
yeah. So
that
no,
might
I
be.
think that's good. I think show up trustworthy. Don't put on a mask when you arrive to the interview. Don't be in a, don't be in a hoodie with with glasses and stuff. Just like be a normal, trustworthy human being, and you should be fine. Like I don't think that's a big problem. And then let me see, referrals. You said,
When to
hmm,
ask for referrals.
yeah.
So
I Go ahead.
as far as, yeah, I mean, I do notice this. One of the questions, like a lot, when I ask my clients to go start asking for feedback or contact a recruiter and say, hey, or usually like ask. If I could, I think we're more self-conscious of, oh, I've emailed them twice, or I've emailed 3 people in the company. Like no one's sitting there saying, oh my God, this Jonas guy's emailed me, who cares? Like, go
Yeah.
for it. I constantly, like I do, I'll email people like on behalf of my clients if I have a connection. I don't even know how I know them sometimes. I'm just like, hey, Bobby, how are you? Like, I've got a great candidate for this role. Would you mind? A great way to ask, like 2 things. Share the job posting if you're messaging them on LinkedIn. When you send a connect request to a recruiter, you can put a short message like, hey, I'm interested in this role. Are you the correct person to speak with? Or can you share this with the hiring manager? Or ask the question. Kind of as this call to action thing. It kind of prompts them to either reply or they might not reply. That's up to you. I would always say ask for their referral. Like if you know someone there, who cares if you haven't talked to them in a while? Like just, hey, no, we haven't spoken in a while. I just saw this job. Like, would you mind? That's up to your comfort level. But I'm more like, if you don't ask, you don't know. And we all do.
Yes.
It's kind of why people are on LinkedIn, why we're connected on here.
Yes.
They don't reply. They don't reply. Great. Move on.
You gotta ask. You gotta ask. I think you
Yeah.
know you don't, if you don't ask, nothing happens. It's the same whether it's sales, anything. You just gotta go out and ask. um and even if you don't, at least nothing happened after asking. But if you never did it,
Yeah.
then there was no potential either way. So you gotta ask. One question coming in from Lul, he's saying, how can one stand out whenever applying for new opportunities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, again, make sure that your profile, that you're relevant. So when a recruiter looks at your profile, they're going to see like, oh, okay, actually need to talk to this person. And then I always like to say 3 touch points for every application. So that's finding people. Like you can go in LinkedIn and you can go into the company's LinkedIn profile and you can go into the people tab and you can put in recruiter or talent. it doesn't matter if you don't know exactly who the hiring manager is. Like, find 3 people, like, hey, I just applied for this job. Are you the hiring manager? Could you share my profile? I would just make it a practice of really going through that. They might not reply. They might, who knows, but at least also a cover letter is a great way to stand out. So if you ever have the option to do one, sometimes it's required, but if it's an option, you're like, oh, forget that. If it's a role you really want, put a cover letter in it, make it short, make it sweet. You don't want to write, no one wants to read 7 paragraphs. Like, I certainly don't when I was a recruiter, but this is where you can tell your story, make it personal, make it interesting. Like, it doesn't need to feel so stuffy and corporate. Like, think of what you would like to know and read about someone. This is the stuff that's going to make you stand out.
Exactly. And the way I would look at it is like the same way that you wrote a cover letter for college applications. That letter was actually what got you in a lot of the times, where
Yeah.
people saw what made you unique, why you're a good fit. So
Yeah.
like use it with that perspective in mind. And of course, with multi touch points, if the company posted it on their LinkedIn, comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really interested in this role, will apply, whatever. But
Yeah.
so that the recruiters will probably see that. Then you reach out to them. You can use a tool like Apollo to get emails, right?
Yeah. You can also get a premium, like LinkedIn Premium gives you in-mail credits, and then another thing to do is do the connect with a note, the connect request with a note. The other thing is, I know we're out of time, but if you haven't already, build your LinkedIn network. Like, get connections, find relevant people. The more first degree connections you have, you're going to have access to the more second and third degrees. Sometimes if they're too far away, you won't even be able to, I think, send a connect request. So start to kind of organically build out your first degrees so that when you are looking for jobs, you're going to be able to connect more with people that are outside of your immediate circle.
Exactly. I think everybody understands the power of social media and connections and followers these days. I think everybody knows, even in work, same truth applies. Like if you have the more connections, the more relationships that you've built online, the power that you can leverage is really, really massive. So we're at time. So I am gonna first of all, I really want to thank Rebecca for today. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for coming.
so fun.
Um, and everybody in the chat, just please give her a thumbs up, give her a heart. Thank her for coming today to share with us. So I really appreciate everybody as well, everybody that came today to
Yes.
join us to
Thank you,
talk about
everyone.
careers. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you so much for
you.
making some time to hang out with us today, and I will see you in a bit with another session. And
Yes.
go follow Rebecca, send her a connection request, say,
Yes.
hey,
Talk to
yeah,
me.
definitely just say, hey, I saw you in the webinar, would love to connect, and she'll connect with you. Now you have one connection in California, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yep.
Okay.
California. Thank
Yep.
you so much for having me, Jonas. This was so much fun. Thank you for everyone who joined. We really appreciate you. It was really fun.
Yes, thanks everybody, and have a good rest of your evening or day wherever you are. See ya.
Take care.